Hello everybody, I'm Jonathan from Boredom Sated, and today I'm going to do a different type of video. It's going to be a video on 5th edition multi-classing. So the reason behind this is, first I want to go over a little bit of detail into most classes to say why is it a good idea, why is it not a good idea to multi-class into it, and some of the general misconceptions about multi-classing in general in 5th edition. So, the first thing that I want to talk about with this is what are the general misconceptions and what are the basics of going into multi-classing in 5th edition. So one of the first things you have to realize is that you do need to have at least one, and for some classes, 2 stats at a minimum of 13 in order to multi-class into them. Specifically, Paladin, Ranger, and Monk require 2 stats to go into them, whereas everybody else only requires just the 1. Now, going into multi-classing, you do get a couple of bonuses. You usually will get a skill or a item proficiency for going into it, and you'll usually get the general item, the weapon and armor proficiencies of the class. You won't get any of the other stuff. You won't get your new saving throws that you get proficiency to or anything like that. And the big real misconception that a lot of people have about it is for spell casting. So how many spell slots do you get if you multi-class? The way it works is you have to add up your total spell casting levels and then look at the general spell casting chart to see how many spells of each level you get. Now, your spells known table is still the same as it normally would be. So if you are, as an example, Wizard and Cleric, the number of Wizard spells you get is based on your Wizard level and your Intelligence modifier. Cleric spells you get is based on your Cleric level and your Wisdom modifier instead of your Intelligence. However, your spell slots you don't just get, oh, I've got 4 first level spell slots here and 4 first level spell slots here, so you have 8. It doesn't work like that. You get just the 4, but what your overall spellcasting level is and what spell slots you get is what goes up. So as an example, if you were a 6th level Cleric and 6th level Wizard, because they're both full casters, you would count as a 12th level caster, which means 12th level casters would have, I have a nice little chart here, which is, it would be 4 firsts, 3 seconds, 3 thirds, 3 fourths, 2 fifths, and 1 6th level spell slot. Now, obviously, if you're 6 levels in Wizard and 6 levels in Cleric, you don't have 4th, 5th, or 6th level spells. But you do have the spell slots, and you can upcast those spells that you had. So it's not that bad. The one exception to all these rules is Warlock. Warlock basically does get to just share spells, which is one of the reasons why multi-classing Warlock does seem very, very strong. But really, that's not multi-classing into Warlock, it's multi-classing out of Warlock. And we'll go into that a lot more a little later. The final thing is if you're going into partial spellcasting classes. As an example, if you are going Paladin or Ranger, you add half your level. Also, now that they've added Artificer, you add half your level to your overall spellcasting level. And if you are the fighter or rogue that has the ability to cast spells, you add 1/3 of your level. So if you've got 3 levels of casting in that, you would add 1 level to your overall caster level for your spell purposes. So that's one big thing that needs to be remembered. You can't just take first level in all of the things and then say, I can cast all of the first level spells. You can still only cast the 4. Obviously, certain classes get extra spell slots for abilities and things like that, but that's beside the point for right now. So that's the basic thing you need to know about multi-classing before you do it. Now I want to just go ahead and start talking about each class one at a time. First, I want to go into Artificer, because I'm going to do this in alphabetical order. So when you multi-class into Artificer, the main thing that you gain is you gain the proficiencies gained. Well, the first thing you gain is your proficiencies gained, which is light armor, medium armor, shields, thieves' tools, and tinkerer's tools. So you do gain all of those as for going into Artificer. Now, why multi-class into Artificer? There's a couple of possible reasons. First, you do get first level spells, and unlike Paladin and Ranger, you do get cantrips, and that's kind of nice. So you've got some first level spells and you've got some cantrips for going into Artificer. Now, again, I should have mentioned this earlier, but most of what I'm going to talk about is going 2, 3, or 4 levels into each one, because it's really talking about splashing into these character classes rather than like a 2-class build, because a 2-class build will work with practically any 2 character classes as long as they make some sense. So most of what I'm talking about here is going the 3 levels you need to be able to get the subclass of each build, your path, and we'll go at it from there. So what do you gain additionally for going into Artificer? The other things that you gain really for going into Artificer past your basic spell casting is going to pretty much just be based on your path. Now, a couple of the paths are meh for for going into it for multi-class. The Alchemist doesn't really do that much for you for multi-classing purposes. The 2 that I want to kind of go into more are the Armorer and the Battlesmith. The reason for that is because they give you a very specific buff. The Armorer allows you to, as long as you're using a weapon from the armor, the special armor, it allows you to attack using intelligence to hit and damage. This is one of the few things that will allow you to do that with melee attacks or ranged attack or ranged, basic attacks, as opposed to having to use strength or dexterity. That's for the Armorer, and the Armorer also makes it so you don't have to have the strength requirement to wear certain types of armor. So the Armorer can be really good to multi-class into if you are a intelligence-based class that wants to add in some extra stuff. You can also do it as a martial class where you're using intelligence for some reason. Also, you do, as an Artificer, have the ability to make basic magic items starting at level 2. There's a couple of things that you can do. It's your it is called infusioning, using infusions. Like you can give yourself a +1 weapon or a +1 armor, and that's actually where we're going to go with the reason for the Battlesmith. The Battlesmith does a couple of things. First, it does give you a little pet. The problem is that multi-classing wise, the pet won't have very many hit points because the pet's hit points are based on your levels in Artificer. Everything else about it, damage and armor class, is based on your proficiency modifier, so that will still go up as you level in everything rather than just in Artificer. However, the main reason to think about Artificer, again, is for the fact that if you are using a magical weapon, you can swing as an Artificer using intelligence and to hit and damage once again. This makes it so that it can be very useful for a class like the Spellsinger. Anything that you would be using intelligence for, you can, but you needed 2 stats, you can now do it as just 1. As long as, again, you're doing it with intelligence. So the Artificer is probably one of those more niche character classes to multi-class into, but it does have some fun stuff to go in. The second class we're going to talk about is going to be the Barbarian. Now, the reason to go Barbarian, there's a couple of pretty good reasons to go Barbarian. First, of course, is going to be Rage. When you rage as a Barbarian, first, you have to remember that you cannot wear heavy armor in raging. But you gain advantage on strength checks and saving throws. If you are making a melee attack using strength, you get damage bonuses. And the most important part is you get resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. Now, you get that from going in for 1 level. So it wouldn't be the worst just to go 1 level of Barbarian for certain purposes like that. However, At level 1, you also get unarmored defense, which is basically if you are wearing light or no armor. If you're wearing no armor, your armor class is equal to 10 plus your dex plus your con, and you cannot, but you still can use a shield to gain its benefit. So for certain character classes, you might want to go that way as well, but most of them probably not, because most of the character classes that you're not going to be wearing armor in are probably not going to be strength based. Now, obviously, reasons to continue going up Barbarian. At level 2, you do get Reckless Attack, which makes it so that you get advantage on all of your attacks for the next round. However, all attacks made against you in that next round are also have advantage against you. So that kind of sucks. Danger Sense is also a nice ability, so you can look at that, and that makes it so that you have advantage on dexterity saving throws against effects that you can see, such as traps, spells, or spell-like abilities. Now, the third level is where you get your Primal Path. Your Primal Path can be very, very useful. As an example, in the basic ones from the Player's Handbook, you've got the Path of the Berserker, which gets you Frenzied Rage. Frenzied Rage, you can use a additional melee attack, but as a bonus action. But when it ends, you gain a level of exhaustion. Exhaustion in this edition is pretty bad, so it's not necessarily the best way to go. And the path of the totem, the animal totem path, you can do a couple of cool things there, including giving yourself the most common, which is giving yourself resistance to all damage other than psychic by going with the Path of the Bear. Again, if you want to play a melee-based character like a fighter or a paladin, this is not a bad way to go. Obviously, you can't wear heavy armor, but you probably don't mind that much considering the bonuses that you're going to get by going into Barbarian. However, remember that you cannot cast spells while you're raging, so obviously you probably don't want to go into Barbarian if you're playing some sort of caster. Next up is the Bard. There's multiple reasons to go into Bard as well. Obviously, first is spellcasting. Spellcasting for the Bard gets you the same thing. You get several cantrips known, you get first level spells, you are a full spellcaster. So you would go up in full spellcasting levels one at a time. You are charisma-based. So because you're charisma-based, you might want to multi-class in here as a Warlock or as a Sorcerer. Or if you're going into as a Paladin and you want to do have some extra spells, you can do it that way as well. Also, you do get Bardic Inspiration, which you can use to buff other people. And once you get to your Bardic College, you can also use it for other purposes. One of my main reasons to want to go into Bard is for Jack of all trades. Jack of all trades makes it so any skill or ability check that you do not get your proficiency modifier to, you get to add half your proficiency modifier to instead. This is very fun for making it so that you are better at using skills. And more specifically, it also does give you a bonus to your initiative, because initiative is something that it is almost impossible to get your proficiency modifier to, but it is still considered an ability check. Next, you get an expertise. Expertise is always fun because, again, it gives you double for proficiency in a couple of skills. And then you've got to choose your Bard College. Third level for your Bard Colleges. The Bard Colleges are all pretty strong. One of the most common ones, of course, is going to be the College of Lore. College of Lore is also really great to go into just for a little bit because, first of all, you gain 3 more proficiencies with any skills you want, which is great. And also you get Cutting Words, which is one of the best ones if you aren't super high in charisma. What Cutting Words does is makes it so that when any creature within 60 feet of you makes an attack roll, ability check, or damage roll, you can use a reaction to expend a use of Bardic Inspiration to reduce that die by the number you rolled. Obviously, it's only a d6 because we are not going far into Bard, but that can still be the difference between life, death, hitting, missing, making a saving throw, or failing a saving throw. Although, actually, saving throw is not one of the things listed here, so you cannot reduce someone's saving throw with it. So Bard has a lot of positive things that you can go into for it. It is one of the more universal ones, but you do have to remember, of course, you have to have a charisma of 13 in order to multiclass into Bard. Next one is Cleric. Cleric has some positives and negatives, as all of them do. Cleric is another full spellcasting class. It is wisdom-based, and that's actually one of its weaknesses, because wisdom-based is a little bit more uncommon to work with. Also, multiclassing spellcasters with other spellcasters, because you don't actually get higher level spells, you just get the same number of spell slots, doesn't really seem that worthwhile to me in 5th edition. Now, obviously, if you want to, go right ahead. But to me, it doesn't feel that worthwhile. One of the best parts about going Cleric is that you do get your domain at level 1 instead of at level 3, which is quite cool. So you can choose what domain you want to go, and there's lots and lots of different domains available. You've got, just in the player's handbook, you've got the knowledge, life, light, nature, tempest, trickery, or war domains. And there's plenty of others in many, many other books. Each of these also give you a 2nd level channel divinity, and the channel divinities are very, very cool as well. So really, that's one of the best parts about going Cleric, which is you only need to go 2 levels to get most of the basic stuff you would want from it. And it gives you the ability to take whatever Cleric 1st level spells that you want, just for your spells known. But overall, multiclassing into Cleric is one of the weaker ones to go, unless you have a specific reason to do so, or you really want a divine domain. Next is Druid. Druid is one of the weirder ones. Druid is another wisdom-based character class. Obviously, again, spellcasting. You are still a full spellcaster, so all of that stuff that comes along with it goes through. And this is another one where you only have to go 2 levels to get your abilities. So it's very similar to Cleric in that manner. There are a lot of fun Druid circles to go into, but a lot of them do kind of feel like they're not very synergistic with other classes. But if you do find something that you like in there, it's always a good way to be able to play it, to go into some of the Druid circles. I especially like some of the new Druid circles from Tasha's guide. So playing around with Druid as a multi-class definitely works. And in fact, if you really want to have some fun with it, you could just multi-class Cleric and Druid, since they're both wisdom-based for that purpose. Get a little bit of different stuff going on. And you also have the ability to wild shape. Now, the problem with wild shaping in this edition is that you, especially if you're only multi-classing into it for a little bit, is that you can only turn into a creature that's CR 1/4 or less. And you may not have a swim speed, and you may not have a fly speed. One of the main reasons that everyone would probably think to go into wild shaping to a Druid is to turn into a little bird or a little fish. You can't do it. You're not allowed to fly. But it's one of the less versatile classes to multi-class into, but it still definitely has its abilities, and it can be a lot of fun to do. After Druid, we get into Fighter. The fighter types, the martial classes, really multi-class with each other much better than the casters do. Because you don't have to worry about the additional minuses from spellcasting. You don't have to worry about your spellcasting, about your spells. You just get your abilities, and they do stack the way you generally want them to. So going into Fighter has some really great abilities to it. First of all, you get a fighting style, and fighting styles just make you slightly better with kind of anything you want. Archery makes it so you have a +2 to hit. Defense gives you +1 to AC. Dueling is if you've got a weapon in one hand and no other weapons, you have just to straight up get +2 to damage rolls. Great weapon fighting, you can re-roll 1s and 2s if you roll, because you're looking at a D10 or a D12 weapon, so nice big stuff. But there is a lot of good reason to go just into it for that, but obviously there's way more. At level 2, you get Second Wind, and you have or Action Surge. I think Second Wind is level 2. No, Second Wind is level 1. Second Wind basically allows you to use a bonus action to regain your hit points equal to your D10 plus your fighter level, which Not that great because we're only multi-classing, but it is something you can just use as a bonus action. And bonus action abilities are really nice to just have sitting around when you can. One of the main reasons to go into fighter is for action surge, which is on your turn once per long rest or once per short rest or long rest, you can take an action surge, which basically gives you one additional action. The main reason to do this is, first of all, that additional action can be used to cast a spell if you really want to, or as you get higher level in other classes and you've taken something that gets multiple attacks, you can use multiple attacks. So most character classes that are going to multi-class into fighter probably have 2 attacks, or you're going into fighter to get at least the 2 attacks because it's one of the many classes that gets a second attack at level 5. And using action surge, you can take 4 attacks in a round instead of 2, or 5 instead of 3, blah 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 blah, depending on how you're fighting it. And of course, then at level 3, you get your martial archetype. Most of the fighter martial archetypes are quite strong. There's a lot of different ways that you can go with this, and there's a lot of them that give you some really fun abilities. The basic one in the book is Champion, which basically just gives you the ability to crit on a 19 or 20 instead of just on a 19, which again is very cool. But there are so many other martial archetypes that give you some really, really fun bonuses just for going into level 3. Again, take a look at the new ones in Tasha's. They are a lot of fun. After fighter, we get to monk. Monk is one of the harder ones to multi-class into because monk key points, you really need to keep going in the class to get the key points where they're useful to you. The martial arts, to make it so you're attacking with your fists, is, again, something you need to keep going into to make it worthwhile at all. You can use your martial arts abilities, and you can use, like, Flurry of Blows, but the problem with Flurry of Blows is that it's strictly for your unarmed attacks or monk weapons. So you can do it, and there's a lot of ways to be able to make it so that the monk is strong with a multi-class, but you kind of have to have come up with something specific beforehand. And it's really a monk multi-classing into something, not really multi-classing into monk. Now you can, but monk is one of the ones where you need 2 stats. You do need both dexterity and wisdom in order to be able to multi-class into monk. And monk does have a lot of really fun abilities. It's just, as I said, again, it's probably not one of the ones that's more well-built for multi-classing. Next, after the monk, we go into the paladin. The paladin is probably the single most commonly multi-classed into class in the entirety of 5th edition. Why? Because of Divine Smite. Divine Smite is an incredibly powerful ability. You can use any spell slot, essentially, to increase your damage. Specifically, starting at level 2, when you hit a creature with a melee attack, you can expend 1 spell slot to deal radiant damage to the target in addition to the weapon's damage. The extra damage is 2d8 for a first level slot, plus a d8 for each spell slot higher than first, to a maximum of 5d8. So anything higher than casting a 4th level spell is still only going to do a d8. And if you deal damage to an undead or a fiend, the maximum is 68 instead, and the damage increases by 1d8 automatically, which is, again, very fun. So this is a reason why a lot of people multi-class into Paladin, because you can get a lot of free damage by going into Paladin. If you're already playing a spellcaster build that has spell slots, you get an enormous amount of work by going into Paladin. One of the most common multi-class builds is Warlock, Paladin, Sorcerer, because you've got charisma based, and a strength and charisma based character. If you're going with the whole melee build, you can get more spell slots because you're going with a full caster. Warlock has special rules for how they get their spells, because Warlock gets to have their spells plus a regular spellcaster combined. So going with a full caster plus a Warlock gets you a bunch of spell slots. And the Divine Smite makes it so that multiclassing in from a melee character that is doing more spellcasting is very, very strong. So Divine Smite is one of the main reasons why any melee character can go into it and be useful. And more specifically, melee casters can go into it and be very strong. And the funny thing is that's not even all you get from going into Paladin. You still get a fighting style at level 2, so it's the same fighting styles as the fighter, which is great. You get lay on hands, so you can do some healing. Your total pool is equal to your Paladin level times 5, which isn't a lot, but free healing is still free healing. You do get, again, a little bit of spell casting. And, of course, by a 3rd level, you also are now immune to disease and get your Sacred Oath. The Sacred Oaths for Paladin can be very, very strong. You also get a Channel Divinity to go along with those, which is also very, very strong. So if you want to play more of a martial, cleric type, obviously that's the purpose of going into a Paladin. So doing a little bit into Paladin gets you so much stuff. And the Sacred Oaths, again, can get you some really, really cool, fun things. The example, again, from the basic version would be the Oath of Devotion, which gets you a Channel Divinity of Sacred Weapon. As an action, you can imbue one weapon you are holding with positive energy using your Channel Divinity. For a minute, add your Charisma modifier to attack rolls made with that weapon. So that's, again, pretty freaking cool, especially if you're going for a melee build that uses Charisma. Again, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but Warlock Paladin is very strong if you're going with a melee build. After Paladin, we are going on to Ranger. Now, Ranger is an interesting one. Because, first of all, you do need, again, 2 stats. You need Dexterity and Wisdom. But Ranger is a lot more versatile, especially now, compared to the way that it used to be. Favored Enemy and Natural Explorer are mediocre abilities. However, in Tasha's guide, they gave you alternate versions of both of them, and the alternate versions of both of them are very strong. The alternate version of Natural Explorer basically gets you an extra language, and it gets you the equivalent of an expertise. And if you stay in till level 6, the improvements to it are fantastic. It gives you additional movement speed, and it gives you both a climbing and swim speed just for existing, which is very cool. The changes to Favored Enemy essentially gives you your own several times per day version of Hunter's Mark that you can do for free. And the best part is that it counts as concentration, but it's as if concentration instead of actually concentration, so you can use it and a concentration spell at the same time. Because of that, it makes it so that if you are, again, trying to deal weapon damage, going into multiclassing into Ranger is actually very, very strong. The problem is that you have to be both a little bit of Dex and a little bit of Wisdom to do it, but if you can make those sacrifices, it's a very, very powerful character. Since you can do now both the free Hunter's Mark, you can always choose Hunter's Mark as a first level spell to basically do double Hunter's Mark. And when you choose a Ranger archetype, you can additionally get some sort of an additional weapon once per round for most of them. Again, if you want to go base, you can go with the Hunter, which says as long as the person you're hitting is at less than maximum hit points, as if they are down any from their maximum hit points, they take an additional D8 damage once per round, which is fantastic considering going just 3 levels in, you can do a D4 on all of your additional attacks on a single target, a D6 on all of your additional attacks on a single target with Hunter's Mark, and be able to add a D8 to your damage once per round. Not to mention, Ranger also gets a fighting style. So a lot of fun things to go in for Ranger. It gets much more powerful if you go 6 levels in, but going 3 levels in is still good. And going 4 and 5 doesn't hurt, because 4th level for every character class is an ability score improvement, which means that there's certain reasons to go 4 levels into anybody. 5th level, because it's a martial class, is extra attack. And again, 6th level gets you those improvements, which are well worthwhile. After Ranger, we go into Rogue. Rogue is another one kind of like Monk, where it's better to just keep going up in Rogue. Multiclassing in Rogue, it's not usually you're going to multiclass into Rogue. It's more you're going to multiclass out of Rogue to get some additional abilities. If you were going to multiclass into Rogue, there are some really cool things you get. Obviously, Sneak Attack, which is a d6 for every other level. Expertise gets you double proficiency with a couple of skills. Cunning Action is fantastic, which allows you to use your bonus action to dash, disengage, or hide, which is great. And at 3rd level, as usual, you do get your Roguish archetype, and there's lots of different useful Roguish archetypes, but in general, Rogue is one of the weaker classes to multi-class into for a short period of time, unless you have a specific build in mind. Now we get to our final casters, which is going to start with Sorcerer. Sorcerers have the normal thing of course, they're full spellcasters, so it's good to go into. They're charisma-based, which again makes them a good multi-class target for Warlocks and Paladins, or Bards. And one of the best things about them is that they get to choose their Sorceress origin, which is their choice, at level 1, like Clerics do. Which basically gets you a bloodline, it gets you some additional cool little abilities, and it's very, very nice. As an example, again, the basic one in the book is Draconic Resilience. At level 1, your hit point maximum increases by 1, and 1 again every time you gain a level in this class. Additionally, when you aren't wearing armor, your AC is 13 plus your dexterity modifier, which definitely is not too bad. There's lots of different sorceress origins. One of my favorite ones is essentially the Holy Origin, which gives you some really cool stuff, including some bonuses that you can add to some of your rolls. But all of the different origins, because you get them at level 1, make Sorcerer a very strong class to multi-class into. You are a full caster, so multi-classing in for casting purposes is very strong. And you also can get your spell slots back with sorcery points, which is a very nice concept. And you do get meta magic spells, which can be, again, a lot of fun, especially things like Empowered Spell, Quickened, Twinned, things like that. And there's a lot of really fun stuff you can do with that, making it so that Sorcerer is definitely a good class to go into even for a little bit, or if you're going for like a 50-50 build, Sorcerer is a great secondary class for a lot of different class builds. Next, we're going into Warlock. Warlock, because of the way the casting works and it stacks with spellcasting, definitely makes it a strong contender for multi-classing if you're going for casting, and an even stronger one as a starting class if you're going to go for a melee Warlock build. Melee Warlock builds, obviously, we have the one we already talked about, which is the Warlock Paladin Sorcerer build, which is very strong. You can also do Warlock in combination with several other classes, like Fighter, to be able to get some bonuses, and several other ways you can go, but don't really want to get into that too much here. Multi-classing as a Warlock, obviously, we just said the strength is your spell slots, your invocations work in tandem with normal spell casting. So even though you don't get higher level spell slots, you do actually get more spells, it is really, really nice. You do get also your Pact Boon on your Otherworldly Patron. So your Otherworldly Patron is a first level choice you have, which is kind of how you're going to play the character. And then at level 3, you get to choose your Pact. And the Pact can make a really, really big difference. Again, Pact of the Blade, Pact of the Chain, Pact of the Tome. They put in a couple of other ones, I think. But most of the time, again, I just generally think, when I think Warlock for most cases, I just think of the melee Warlock build because it's the most popular one. So, again, with Warlock, it's very strong, but usually it's the base class, not the multi-class. but it can be very powerful to multiclass into if you're looking for something very specific. Finally, we get to Wizard. The main difference and the main problem with going Wizard instead of Sorcerer is Wizard, you've got to come up with a class that synergizes it with an intelligence rather than Sorcerer, which synergizes with charisma. Intelligence is a less used character trait for a lot of stuff in this edition, at least, which does make it a little bit less common. Obviously, it's again a full spellcaster, which is great. And if you are going for a couple of spells and you want to be able to cast a couple of more different spells, it's great if you're going to go in just the one spellcasting class. You also do get an Arcane Tradition at level 2, again, instead of level 3, which is quite good. You also can gain back 1 spell per day with Arcane Recovery, which is, again, a very useful ability. But the Arcane Traditions, at least in the main book, are not really that great. Some of the other Wizard builds can be very, very strong. If you're watching this, you probably know what I mean. But that one really is probably something that you do as a base class and multi-class into some of the other stuff to make it more powerful. So those are all the character classes. There's reasons to multi-class into everybody, but in general, this should give you a pretty good idea of what you get by just putting a little bit of a toe into each character class, which is the main reason why I wanted to do this. Going 4 levels into any character class can be really useful, but since usually a lot of the levels you get stuff at like 3, 7, 13, or for Wizard specifically, you get it at 14 for your additional Arcane Tradition. A lot of times you want to go like 11 levels, 6 levels, 3 levels, or 14 levels, 3 levels, 3 levels, things like that. So it makes it more difficult to go into for 4. But again, it depends on what your goals are for those purposes. If you've seen any of the multi-classing build videos I've talked about, most of them don't involve going the 4 levels because there's just something more efficient you can get elsewhere, unless you need the stat modifiers, which obviously means if you need the stat modifiers, take the stat modifiers. But that is my general class build or class guide for multi-classing in 5th edition. If you have any questions, obviously feel free to comment. If you liked it, if you want more things like it, if you want me to explain other stuff, leave a comment, subscribe, all that kind of fun stuff. Again, over 90% of our views are from non-subscribers, so please help us out. Hit that subscribe, hit that notification button, and I'm Jonathan, and I hope you guys had fun, and I'll see you next time.